Oh, I forgot to read that in my contract. I'm still waiting for my rider of like 13 Skittles that are only red. Let me know when you're ready, Adrian. Sweet. Okay. Well, I'll probably be like from red line to like right here. Unless somebody wants to catch me if I stage dive. Volunteers? You got one? No, Terry, I need someone with two hands. Love you, Terry. Hey, Eric. Eric and Dengata. What the hell, man? Yeah, that's what I thought. No, red Skittles, man. Come on. You know what? I will take... I'll do Airheads. No. I do know what you're talking about, though, yeah. Let me know when it's ready. Are we ready? I can start? All right. Thank you. All right. Thanks, everyone, for coming out to my talk. I want to honestly thank Rocky and the entire BSides crew. So, Rocky, thank you for everything you've done. This is a great con. Thank you. So, I'm super stoked about being on the big boy stage this year because I don't have to compete with a lot of noise. And I get to speak to more people, even though most of the seats are empty. I'm going to pretend there's people in them. So we're going to get started. We're going to talk about the marriage of threat intelligence and incident response, or threat hunting for the rest of us. Thank you to the MRK marketing team, by the way, who did these slides, because I am not talented enough to do this on my own. So start out a little bit about me. My name's Jamie Murdoch. I am the security program manager. Is that my title? Yeah. Security program manager at MRK Technologies. Basically, we do consulting and stuff like that. If you really want to know what we do, talk to me afterwards. This isn't a plug for them. I've been doing this for about 20 years. It's something I'm very passionate about, something I really love doing, but I don't identify myself as an InfoSec guy. I identify myself first and foremost as a father and as a husband, as a former Marine, but most importantly, personally to me, I mean, I love my family and stuff, but I'm a gamer. So, Bodoc 0311 on Xbox Live. Let's game. Who games? I was going to say, come on, I see like 5 hands. Everybody should raise their hand, otherwise leave. If you want to follow me on Twitter, I'm at Bodoc. Honestly, most of the stuff I tweet is just retweets of other stuff, so I'm not original at all. So if you want to follow me, cool. If not, you're probably going to see what I tweet anyway. So why are we here today? What do we really want to talk about? I want to talk to you about incident response, threat intelligence, how to take those two components together and create an internal threat hunting program. And by doing that, we're going to tie everything together, and you can go back to your organization and say, hey, I want to do some stuff. So, 2018, the new hotness was threat intelligence. However, it was not hot at all. Actually, it wasn't 2018. It was probably 2017. Everyone probably started hearing threat intelligence, and there was so many product offerings for it. Now, we're in 2019. I'm in 2019. Y'all are in 2018. I'll be in 2018 for today. The new hotness is threat hunting. How many of you have seen anything marketing related to threat hunting? Out of those people raising your hands, how many people saw marketing material about threat hunting a year to a year and a half ago? Nobody. It's because marketing didn't really pick it up. Now, at the same level, who thinks that threat hunting is something that's new? Nobody. Exactly. Threat hunting is not anything new. Threat hunting is something that, as a community, we've been doing for a while. We just didn't have a cool buzzword behind it. So, that being said, there's a buzzword behind it. We can use buzzwords as folks in the trenches to get more accomplished for our security programs. The C-suite is hearing things like threat hunting engagement. Give me $100,000. I'll tell you if there's a threat in your environment, all these other things. So they know what's going on. They've heard this term. So let's capitalize on that and start doing things we've been wanting to do in our environment because marketing says it's cool now. When I look at threat hunting, it all starts, to me, true threat hunting behind incident response. If you want to do this in your organization, the best way to get it accomplished is when you start with an incident of some kind. So a little background on incident response. It drives me crazy when, as a consultant, I go into organizations and you ask, what do you do for incident response? Do you have an incident response plan? And who are members of your incident response team? A majority in 2018, for y'all, I'm in 19, but a majority of folks say that is something that IT and information security focuses on. They're going to let us know if there's anything that we need to do. If you want to raise your hand, that's fine. How many of you have been involved in a current employer or maybe a former employer who had that mentality? Incident response is something that IT does. Okay. Some folks raise their hand. Some other folks probably don't want to raise their hand, and I can respect that. But still, in larger organizations, there's incident response plans, and if you try to do a tabletop, you can't get the attention of the C-suite. You can't get the attention of management or business functions. Why do you think that is? I'm interactive, so y'all are going to have to talk. Not my job. My favorite. Sorry, we don't have time for that. That doesn't fly. Other organizations that are critical, and I just have a few up here, but anytime, if you've been involved in an actual incident, most of these organizations inside the business listed here and others have to be involved. HR, legal, corporate communications, operations, senior and executive management, production operations, all these other groups, they're the ones who are going to be making decisions, not us. We're going to be advising them on what we think should happen. But it's business units that have to assume what? Risk. They have to look at the information we're going to provide them and say, we have a solid risk appetite where we're not going to do X, Y, or Z based on your recommendation because as an organization, we're going to assume that risk. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that. But going back to what we're looking at here. How many people here who have an incident response plan, raise your hands if you feel like it, or have been involved with an organization that has an incident response plan but doesn't do a tabletop or any other type of exercise for incident response? If you feel like raising your hands, please do. Okay, so I saw one person. My assumption is that there's more of you who probably feel that's the truth but don't want to raise your hands, and that's fine. I do a lot of incident response tabletops. Most of the time, the very first client, or if it's the first time doing this for a client, I say, who is the target audience? So I can build the incident response tabletop around that. 9 times out of 10, it's the IT silos, including information security, but primarily it's an IT thing because business units look at it as an IT problem. So before I click next to let you see the awesome graphic that's going to spin at you and blow your mind. Everyone knows what a classic incident response model looks like. It looks like, woo, like that. We prepare, detect and analyze, contain, eradicate, recover, and then we do our post-incident activities. Who has been involved in doing something like this? A lot of us, right? This is 101 stuff right here. I'm not going to dive into detail. What I am going to propose is something different. When it comes to threat hunting, I change it up a little bit. Yes, preparation is important. However, if you're going to do any kind of threat hunting, in my opinion, you probably have some sort of preparation already done. So again, in discussion of threat hunting, I think it starts with detection. After we detect, we go through the rest of the steps. I'm not a slide reader, but you can see them up there. We go through the rest of the steps of a traditional incident response model, but the last thing we do is preparation. Obviously, we're going to talk about that a little bit more, but I want you to digest that a little bit. When we talk threat hunting, it all starts with detection. So let's talk a little bit about detection. A lot of organizations in this day and age, hopefully, have some sort of SIM or something that they can utilize to say, hey, there might be something bad going on in our environment. Before we do anything, we need to identify whatever that alert is that actually a security incident? If you're on the blue team or you've ever been on the blue team and your responsibility has been monitoring and detection, you should know that just because a SIM or other platform says, oh shit, something happened, doesn't necessarily mean it's an incident. Right? Everyone agree with that? Thank you. We don't have the luxury to assume everything is an incident because it comes through as one. We have to do our analysis. We have to, most importantly, record everything we do when we're doing our detection step. Who here has a pad and paper next to their on their desk ready to write something down? Good. And I looked across at the hands that raised, and most of them we're older. We've been doing this for a little bit. You young bastards probably have like your iPhones next to you going, I'm going to type shit on here. At the end of the day, I don't care how you do it, but you have to document everything. And we're going to get into why that's important. But when we first get into our detection, we're going to identify some very basic things, right? We're going to look at what the SIM is telling us. We're going to look at other detection methods. Maybe we have some next-gen black box X that, prevents anything that a hacker will ever do in our environment, and we're going to look at that. So we're going to look at a lot of different things. The most important thing that you should take away from this slide, sorry, camera, is this. We need to gather all the indicators of compromise that we can identify during detection. And we're going to go more deep into that. First and foremost, though, and it's okay, we're at a BSides, we're learning, right? So who's not familiar with the concept of indicator of compromise? Are we all good? Okay. Basically, at the end of the day, just in case you didn't want to raise your hand, that's cool. An indicator of compromise is something you can utilize that says an attacker's here, or I want to utilize this bit of information or threat intelligence to look for an attacker. It's basically just like it sounds, it's an indicator. Next, the analysis phase. If you've been through a real incident, you're probably going to understand where I'm coming from when I say this. Out of everything that you're seeing on this slide, this is the most important phase. And here's why I say that. I've been involved in many large-scale incidents for companies that I can name off that you'd be like, oh, I know them. And they go through incidents, and they do all their work. They go through all the steps. They think they've got it closed, and it turns out it's not closed. Something else pops up. Why do you think that is? They didn't write down their IOCs. It's a very good, that's actually one I haven't heard before. That's correct. What else? Give that man a cigar. They didn't thoroughly follow their own processes in the beginning, which ties to, what do you do when you analyze something? If I see 10.1.1.5 and it's talking to a potentially known command and control server, but I don't look at everything else that 10.1.1.5 is looking at, that's a mistake. I know that there's potential for that host communicating with something that's bad. Why am I not looking at what else it's talking to? Don't follow one single rabbit hole. Analysis is key when you want to fully run an incident. When I asked about who has paper and pencil, or, you young folks that use iPads and shit, that's fine. As long as you're documenting everything. The reason for that, there's multiple reasons for that. When you get done, you need to update your playbooks if you have them, your run books, whatever you want to call them, your knowledge base on how to do things, whatever it is. You need to update your documentation. That's why you take notes on everything you do. Now, I fully understand that that's hard to do, because if you're actually in an incident and there's 1,500 different things going on that you're working on, it's hard to keep track of everything you're doing. But do your best, especially the key things. I already talked a little bit about this, further investigate results from other searches. when we talk about threat intelligence a little bit, I'll hit back on this. But basically, what this means is, while I'm looking up 10.1.1.5, because I want to see more than just what I know it's doing, I'm going to document some other things. Like, all right, I see communication from this host, which is my laptop, let's say, and it's communicating to a file server that I normally use. That's expected business pattern. But I still want to document that, because maybe as I go through and I find other things, I realize that I shouldn't be talking to that server for some reason, and maybe there's lateral movement going on. There's other things that could be going on. So even though it may seem benign, write it down and then flush that out later. Threat intelligence. That was the hotness in 2017-18. Who here does not understand what threat intelligence is? Just in case you don't want to raise your hand, that's cool. Threat intelligence is exactly what it sounds. It is a threat to an organization. Now, I've given threat intelligence talks before, and I always start off with threat intelligence is more than ones and zeros. Threat intelligence is more than some feed you'll get that says this IP or this domain name is bad. Threat intelligence truly is any threat to an organization. Whether that's brand reputation, whether that's physical, whether that's ones and zeros, it doesn't matter. True threat intelligence is any threat to an organization. However, for the purpose of this talk, we're just going to focus on the ones and zeros. Now, when we talk threat intelligence, the easiest thing to utilize is OSINT, open source intelligence. For those of you who don't know what open source intelligence might be, who here has ever used a search engine called Google? Wow, there's people who don't know who Google is? You know what? Here's to you. If you've used Google before, you've done open source threat intelligence. It's literally that easy. There's a ton of resources out there. I'm going to highlight one specifically. Disclaimer, this is not product placement. I have nothing to do with this organization. MRK is a VAR, does not resell any of their stuff, so I get nothing out of it. The only reason I'm utilizing one specific tool in my slides is because, for me, it has done a lot of good. So, that tool is OTX, or the Open Threat Exchange, from Alien Vault. There's a number of different indicators of compromise you can get from OTX. There's a lot of great information. They have links to articles, things like that. OTX.alienvault.com, I believe. Eric? Is that it? All right. It's a great open source threat intelligence tool. So, in this example, this is a real example of an incident that I worked for a client. Saw communications to this host name. So all I did was went to OTX and I typed in that host name. And this is what showed up. What you see here is what's called a pulse in OTX. Basically, that just means, hey, I saw this shit before and here's what I saw. That's what a pulse is. So I go through and I say, oh, this is connected to a crypto mining botnet. That's probably not cool. I look a little bit further, and I see that there are indicators of compromise, and in this case, we're dealing with MD5 hashes. But there's also a write-up on there. Huh. That's cool. So now I have, 51 indicators of compromise, MD5 hashes, and there's an article. Awesome. Let's see what that article says. Now, I'm not going to read this to you, but somebody wrote an article about what this botnet does, and it's cryptocurrency mining botnet. Most importantly, though, the one thing marketing didn't do was keep my little red boxes. We look and we see infected with NSA arsenal spread through SMB port 445. That is the most critical piece of information I got from this OTX. It's the most critical piece of information I got from open source intelligence. And it took me a whopping 2.5 minutes to get this kind of information. So, full disclosure, I gave this talk yesterday at BSides Pittsburgh, and one of the questions I had asked was, if you remember the diagram I put of containment and all that stuff, he said, in this case, this is wormable, so you would obviously immediately put blocks in. He is absolutely correct, and I told him I would say this in this presentation, because that's not what I do next in the next slide. However, I have information on this. So, again, we saw the host name. That's what it started with. Potentially malicious activity talking to this host name, which is flagged as malicious. We've identified why it's malicious, because it's part of a crypto mining currency botnet. So, we want to gather more information. We want to see what else this thing would do. So at this point, I think, what would Elon do? Based on what we've seen so far, what should we do? And this is a question to y'all. Get on Twitter. Elon, SpaceX is kind of sucking right now, so you want to get into this shit instead. He doesn't answer me when I talk. What else should we do? Y'all are some smart people in here, so I know somebody's got a good idea. See who else is talking to him? Outstanding. Dynamic analysis. Woot, woot. Nice. What else? What else can we do? What? Look at logs. Look at you. Continuous log monitoring. Thank you. This is what's called participation in a presentation, y'all. Patch your systems. No, don't ever patch anything. That's stupid. I'm sorry. I had like a brain fart and I was an executive. Hi, my name's Jamie. No, there's a lot of different things we can do. And everyone who mentioned something was 100% on track. All these are things that we can do. One of the things that I did in this specific instance was, and I don't have this in the slides, it's a completely different talk if I wanted to give it, I wanted to know more about this crypto mining currency botnet. Side note, if you don't have a good relationship in your organization with the FBI, I know it's a 3-letter word, but get one. I have 2 different resources, one in Cleveland, one in Akron for the FBI. And I got with them about stuff like this. Guess what they told me when it comes to crypto mining currency botnets? Ransomware is going like this. Because why try to get that through when I can take the resources of an entire data center and start mining cryptocurrency? These things, if you haven't seen them yet, stand the F by, because you're going to. This is a very large business model for for organized attackers, is cryptocurrency botnets. We'll talk a little bit about that later. The point of this is, we're talking threat intelligence. Look up other things. Look in your logs. Dynamic analysis. All these other things is threat intelligence. You may not think that you do threat intelligence, but I guarantee you if you do any kind of analysis in any way, shape, or form that you have to type into a search bar, you're doing at least some open source threat intelligence. Now, let's talk about stopping the bleeding. Containment. Now, this can be a tricky subject with a lot of different organizations. When we look at anything we do from information security, we have to balance it with what the risk to the organization is. Now, when I was younger, and all I thought about was InfoSec and protection and doing the right thing, I would say, we need to keep a host alive, we need to do memory forensics, we need to do all this stuff because we have to know more. Who would agree with that in at least some way, shape, or form? Right? However, if you have to throw on a manager, director, CISO hat, any of those things, there's other things you have to take into consideration. Do you want to keep on a system that the enemy or an attacker has a deep foothold in that could use that as a launching platform for lateral movement or anything else? Because I want my InfoSec team to do forensics? Or am I going to pull it and say there's too much risk? A lot of us want that system kept up. But if you stop for a second, take yourself out of InfoSec and think about business risk, that's not always the case. Which goes back to when we talked incident response and we said it has to be more than the IT department or the InfoSec department or anything else. Somebody other than us is going to make that decision. Should we keep this up or should we go ahead and let it die? It's a hard balancing act. So what do we do in order to make that decision more easy to digest? Time boxing? Dude, you're going like super high right now. We're talking executives, but that is something we can do. What else? That's a really good point, though. I don't mean to dismiss it at all. Woo! Dude, business impact analysis. That will actually, for those of you who aren't aware of business impact analysis, it's basically like, this is the shit we can't live without for this long. At a very, very, very extremely high level. That would become into a huge part of this, a business impact analysis to utilize to point business to security strategy. If you're not fortunate enough to have that, even though it is a very good tool to utilize in this case, what we do is we say impartially, and I know that's hard for a lot of us to be impartial when we're talking security, but what we do is we identify risk. If we don't, here's what we recommend. If we don't do that, here's the risk to the organization. This is what we recommend and this is what we would do in this situation as security professionals. If we don't, risk is X. Now, at that point, that goes to executives or managers, directors, whatever your organization flavor is, to let them make the correct business decision. A lot of times those don't align with what we want to see, but we don't own the business. They have a risk appetite. Let them make that decision. Which is why, again, it's important that they're involved in tabletop exercises. Now, along with containment, we're going to try to stop any other communications that are going on. Let's say that my PC is talking to Eric's PC. Y'all don't know Eric, but you need to meet Eric. Eric's a good guy. And typically I don't talk to Eric's PC, but I found out that it is. Maybe it has nothing to do with this incident or this specific incident, but is that part of my containment exercise? Trick questions are fun. Somebody be brave. Come on, say yes or no. I don't care. Yes. Who said yes? Raise your hand. Woo! Who said no? Who thinks no? Separate incident. So no. Guess what? You both are all right. Why are you both right? I'll tell you. I'm not going to make you guys give a presentation. I'm the one up here. You still want to document it. You still want to note that this is happening and maybe it's not something that should be happening. However, it is a different incident. So I might assign a different team member on my security team to follow up with that. We don't know if they're related yet, but it is definitely something you should pay attention to. So you're both right. Now, let's talk about the greatest buzzword of 2018. You guys just wait till you get to 19 and you see what the new one is. But for 18, it's threat hunting. So let's talk about taking the little things that we've seen so far and utilizing it in our organization to do some threat hunting. What's the purpose of threat hunting at the end of the day? It's these three basic things. Detect the intruder, prevent them from getting a further stronghold than what they may already have, and get them the hell off our network. At the end of the day, those are the basic three things of threat hunting. The whole purpose behind this talk is to take all this stuff for you to be able to do this in your organization. You know your organization better than anyone else. Think about these three things and how you can take that back and say, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. Who is familiar with TTP? Not OPP. Actually, I swear to God, more people raised their hand when I said, who's familiar with OPP? Yeah, you know me. All right, so TTP. Tactics, techniques, and procedures. This is what bad guys do. Now, a little side note. Who is familiar with the concept of criminal organizations as threat actors? Most of us, right? Who's familiar with a company called Microsoft? Right. You, sir, did not raise your hand. I'm drinking. If you talk to me later, I'll tell you what they do. There's criminal organizations that are out there that have a better customer service, better presentation model, better delivery model than Microsoft or any other organization out there. Let's face it, criminal activity in, I'm going to say the word, and I don't care, criminal activity and cyber security. Like, you scare me. And by the way, I know you hate it. We have to start saying cybersecurity because if we don't, then executives won't know what the hell we're talking about. It's completely different talk. But when you talk about threat actors, there's groups better at doing production, help desk, customer support, patching, all these other things for their services on the dark web. Who's familiar with ransomware as a service? Who's familiar with hire a hacker? Who's familiar with hire a botnet? All these other things. Those are organized units, sometimes state-sponsored, sometimes not, that care more about their product and their service and their brand reputation than Microsoft or HP or anyone else. That's a problem for us as adversaries. When I start going through this next couple of slides, think about that. I forgot some of the things. Who's not familiar with TTP? Real quick. Tactics, techniques, procedures. Thank you, sir. It's a way to identify what an attacker group or what an attacker organization, or in some cases a specific attacker, is doing. It's in essence kind of like their DNA. And we're going to talk about that kind of in depth. The pyramid of pain. I love the pyramid of pain. What this is, it shows us what different types of indicators of compromise are in relation to how accessible they are and how much we can trust them. So when we look at this, hash values, you can find hash values all day long as an indicator of compromise. It's the most common thing you're going to see. However, in this example, what we're seeing here, it's the least reliable source of information. And we'll talk about that. Then you go up to the very top, and you have true TTP, tactics, techniques, and procedures. It's the least amount of, it's the hardest to find the actual indicator of compromise, but the most reliable one you can find. And we'll talk more about that. File names. Let me rephrase that. You can use a file name for an indicator of compromise, but it is not worth its weight in, it's not worth typing out to put in. If I create a piece of malware custom for your organization, and I call it, holy shit, Jamie's gonna pwn you.exe. All right, you're gonna probably see it and then go, yeah, no, you're not. But if I change the name to Jamie Murdoch's gonna pwn you to.exe, you'll still find that too, right? More than likely. File names aren't very trustworthy. At the bottom scale of what you can trust for an indicator of compromise, we start with file hashes. File hashes are a great tool. They're very highly utilized in threat hunting and a lot of other operations. The problem with the file hash from its reliability as an indicator of compromise, though, is they're easy to change, fairly easy to change, right? If I make very subtle changes, but it doesn't affect the way my malware or my custom exploit works, I'm still changing the MD5 hash, so can you still use it? No. So let's go up the scale a little bit. Host names. I'm sorry, go ahead. So the question is, why are they reported in Alien Vault? It's a very good question. The answer to that is, even though they're the least reliable indicator of compromise, they still are an indicator of compromise. You still can use that. Because let's say that I create a ransomware kit or a custom exploit, and I call it whatever I call it, but it has an MD5 hash. If that file, exploit, ransomware, whatever it is dropped on systems that are in your environment, you can still search for it. It's still something you can utilize. However, the reason it's not as trustworthy is if I make any changes because I go to VirusTotal and I see that somebody flagged on it, and then I make a change to change my MD5 hash. That's what makes it difficult. But it's still something you can utilize. All right. Right. Agreed. So real quick, and I'll take further questions later, but MD5 hashes are adequate to the point of the specific file that's dropped. Polymorphic changes, all these other things, you're right, but you also got to remember a couple of key things. Number one, if I'm not in a sophisticated group, I'm just Jamie Murdoch in my mom's basement, and I'm creating some stuff because I'm going to try to phish you and drop a shell on your system, and I can say, hey, this gives me clout, so now I can get invited to the true Hacker for Hire forums, for example. I'm not going to do a whole lot of changing. I'm going to create this, what I think is a wicked rad, custom exploit to get myself some street cred. You can still utilize that MD5 hash. So let's go up the chain a little bit. Host names. Host names are a little bit harder to change, but you can utilize a lot of different tools. I can utilize FastFlux DNS. I can utilize a bunch of other stuff. So my host name is still kind of, utilized. If I write code and I say, I want you to talk to jamiemurdoch.com, but you discover that, and now I have to change my host name. So it's a little harder for me to do. It's a better IOC than an MD5 hash, but at the end of the day, it's something I can change, and it's not that big of a deal when it comes to my code. The next thing that I look at is ports. How many devs do I have in the house? 1, 2, 3. Devs in the house, woo woo. No? Screw you, devs. Ports. If I have to start coding and I say I want my reverse shell to come over 1337 because I'm uber elite, but that gets discovered. It's an IOC. It's harder for me to change the port and protocol that my custom exploit, my malware, whatever it is utilizing. It's harder to do that for a port and protocol than as a host name. Now you're kind of getting to the space where you're affecting my business, and I'm going to get pissed if I'm a bad guy. Now, full disclosure, this presentation is not over. Again, marketing did my slides for me. Thank you. However, bringing it all together, we're not at the end yet, so let's just pretend that doesn't say that. When we first started talking about all this, we saw, hypothetically, an event. Let's just call it in our sim. But we don't know if it's an actual security incident yet or not. So we do some investigation. In this example, we determined that there was a host name and that it was connecting to a malicious, or we saw an internal host connecting to a potentially malicious host name. We did some research on that, threat intelligence, and we determined that it's part of a cryptocurrency mining botnet. We went through our incident response steps. We did analysis. We looked for other systems. We determined that, yes, my system is talking to Eric's system. I should document that. However, it may or may not be part of the same incident. Still needs to be documented. We're taking this information that we've utilized so far, MD5 hashes, host names, etc., and we're going to plug those into any monitoring and detection platforms we have, SIM, lateral movement, blah, 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 whatever we have, Black Box, X, Next Gen, super fast, kill hackers. And we're going to see if anything else is pointing to that or utilizing any of the indicators that we see. Now is the time we're going to start having a little bit of fun. Now's the time where we're going to go hunting. By the way, I totally love that graphic. I got to find out where they did that. What is threat hunting? Let's really talk about what threat hunting is, right? In this example, we're taking those indicators of compromise that we saw, and we're going to look in our environment for any of those other indicators. That's threat hunting. That's the basis of what threat hunting is. Who here has done threat hunting based off of what I just said? Before I started talking about this, how many people think they had done threat hunting? Okay, a few of you. Y'all have been doing threat hunting before it was a buzzword. You just didn't know it. Who here has heard of Purple Team? That shit's threat hunting. Who here has taken remediation recommendations from a pen test, put that in their environment, but also decide to take it a little bit past that and look for anything else that, to try to exploit it on their own. Who's done that? Y'all have done threat hunting. It's not new. But it is a huge buzzword, and we can utilize that to make our security posture better. That's why I'm giving this talk. So officially, we take those indicators of compromise. We go through the rest of our environment, and there's multiple different ways. Y'all have your own tools. You can think about, how can I take these indicators, put them into the systems that I already own, and push them out to look for other things. Can I use something like sysinternals to, look for running processes in, Explorer or whatever it is, to look for potential, footholds for an attacker? I'm a huge proponent of monitoring and detection. I personally think it's the most important piece of information security. Fight me if I'm wrong. Word. So I put these into my tools. They're my first line of defense. I want to look for other things. I'm going to build content around this because I already have one sign, at least, that something on my network is talking to something I don't want it to. Is anyone else doing it? Let's find out. That old pyramid of pain. Remember that shit, honestly. My slides, I'm going to post them if you follow me on LinkedIn or whatever. Adrian's recording this presentation. It'll probably be up like 30 seconds after I give it. So you can see the pyramid of pain again. But that's very critical when you put a reliability factor to the indicators you see. Eradication. For those of you who have been in an actual incident before, who hates eradication? I can't stand it. Why do you think that is? Why do you think eradication is so hard? You never know when you're done. Perfect answer. What else, though? There's some more answers. Users don't want to delete their shit, and you have to re-image their computers. Actually, extremely accurate in most business organizations. It absolutely is. It is funny, but the shit's true. I am Jamie Murdoch. I am the executive assistant, so don't mess with me. I'm the executive assistant for the CFO. My computer is too important for you to delete anything. Bullshit. I'm sorry. You clicked on a link that says OMG cute kittens. Dave Kennedy's not here. I had to use cute kittens. You clicked on that link. You're compromised. I'm sorry. Your shit's gone. You should have backed it up. What else? I'll throw one out for you. And it has to do with ransomware. What happens if I have a file server and I get ransomware dropped in my file server? That sucks, right? Oh, shit. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to do what? Restore from backups. Woo! What happens if my last backup actually had the ransomware on it? And my older backups suck because they're on tape, and that tape burned to the ground last night. So you see where I'm getting at, though, right? Eradication sucks. Eradication, honestly, in my opinion, is the hardest part. Most importantly, because what the gentleman said, it's the hardest to determine if you actually got everything or not. We're going to talk about that a little bit in a second. When you think about threat hunting and eradication, what I want you to remember is we have taken indicators of compromise for a specific incident, and we're looking throughout our environment to see if we see anything else. How can we prevent this from going from one system to another, or how can we get it completely off our network? In the context of this, that's the focus of eradication. If you have to do actual eradication because of an incident that you go through, drink, because you're going to want to. There's a lot of different things we can look at for eradication. Jamie Murdoch's PC is talking to Eric's PC. I think I'm just, talking to him through a chat about the World Cup, and all of a sudden I have an exploit on my box that's trying to elevate privileges, and now I have bad things happening. What can I do? Host isolation. I can say Eric's PC is now on its own little island but because I still want to see what it's communicating to and I still want to see what it's doing. Host isolation is not pulling it from the network. A lot of exploits, ransomware, blah, 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 have a beacon of some point. What that means is Mr. Malware, Mr. Custom Exploit, Mr. whatever you want to call it, says, do I have a connection to the internet? I'm going to ping Google. If you don't have a connection to the internet, it's going to see that. It's going to say, oh shit, I've been discovered. I'm going to shut myself down or I'm going to destroy myself. That may not be what you want to happen. Segmentation. And I'm not talking about getting the entire network architecture team together and say, hey, we need to start segmenting and carving out entire blocks of shit. What I mean by segmentation is, let's say that I have a field office in Oshkosh, Wisconsin, and that's where I first determined that this host is talking to a cryptocurrency mining host. So why don't I just say, hey, guess what? If you're in this field office, you're on your own. You still get internet connectivity, but I'm not going to let you talk to business critical applications. Oh, and that's not my decision. That's what I'm telling the executives to say. Disclaimer. Network isolation. Who thinks? So I told you what segmentation is. What's network isolation based off of this then? Network isolation, what I'm talking about here is more than just a field office. I'm going to take an entire piece of my network and I'm going to say, this is now where everyone lives if I think you have this piece of malware, ransomware, whatever else. Last year, there was this thing in May. You may have heard of it. It was called WannaCry or something like that. Network isolation actually saved a lot of companies. We still have to survive. We still have business that we have to maintain. I can't immediately put MS 17010 on all these boxes. But they're critical and we have to keep them up and running. Cool. Guess what? Completely different network for that until we can get around to patching it or whatever the hell we have to do. Now, sometimes you do need to take a layer 1 approach. Sometimes you actually do have to say, this host is getting completely ripped off the network. I'm pulling the plug. Or you just take the host, and you pull it off the network, and I take it up and I go, hey, Greg, please run forensics on this. Thank you. The problem with that is, obviously, as soon as you pull the plug, as soon as you kill it, you lose the ability to do memory forensics. However, is there more of an impact to the business if I keep this if I keep this system running to capture 32 gigs of memory? And by the way, who's done 32 gigs of memory before for a capture? I'll cut to the chase. It's not something you can do in like a minute. It takes a while. So do I want to take that time to capture memory off of the system, or is it more of an impact, to do that, or should I just pull the plug and say, I don't care what's in memory right now? That is a business decision. That's why we have business people involved. Post-incident. This is a step that, in my personal experience, 9 times out of 10 gets missed. If you've been involved in an incident before, how many people believe that they've gone through a full post-incident situation? Oh my God, no one raised their hand. No shit. Normally what happens in an incident is we get freaked out. We're in a shields up posture. Anytime, like, if I type my password in wrong once, then I'm going to have somebody in the SOC going, oh shit, Jamie's account's getting compromised. No. It's not a bad thing to be in shields up posture, though. We need to be. We just suffered a true incident. We need to watch for follow-ups. We need to watch for a bunch of other things. However, we need to look at all the steps we've taken so far. We need to look at our documentation. We need to go through everything. This is a step, I swear to God, no one ever does, but it's one of the most critical things you can do after any incident. It's an after-action report and improvement plan. Who here has ever seen one of these things in real life? Tyler, I'm not surprised. A couple other folks. An after-action report. Shocker, Chris has. After action report and improvement plan. This is your, after, this is what's the other word? Not after action report. Somebody come on. Postmortem. Thank you. It's a postmortem. This is telling us, here's the shit that happened. Here's what we did. Here's everything we found. The IP portion is improvement plan. What should we do? For example, and the first thing I said was it was SMB 445, blah, 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 blah. Do we need 445 across our entire environment? If the answer is no, there is an improvement plan item that says block 445 except for X, Y, and Z systems. Does that make sense? We're trying to make improvements so our incident doesn't repeat itself. Very few organizations actually do this. It is honestly one of the most critical things you can do because history repeats itself, and if we don't try to fix the issue that we ran into, we're going to see it again. I was involved in an incident for a global manufacturer that got hit by a legit APT group from China. Gave him, ran the incident with them, gave him an AAR IP, and said, do these things so it doesn't happen again. Maybe 3 or 4 months later, I get a call. Same company. Same thing happened. I said, oh, shit. Did you implement any of the recommendations? No. I can't imagine why you got breached again. That's amazing to me. That's why we put these things together. When you put together your after action report and improvement plan, it doesn't just go to InfoSec, IT, whoever. That has to go to business leaders. That has to go to the line of business. But not in our speak, not in security speak. We have to be able to talk business. We have to associate anything to risk. So in our improvement plan, in the example I gave of 445, we're going to say we need to block port 445 except for specific, servers or applications or whatever. Here is why. Here's the risk if we don't, and here's the risk if we, and here's the impact if we do. We have to show risk and impact. An incident is not complete until we do this. And the reason I say this goes back to analysis and containment. Until we get through this and provide our after-action report to the entire incident response team, we don't know if we're done. Because what if that incident response team says, you know what? I want to make 100% sure, because that can happen, but they wanted to. I want to make 100% sure that we don't have this anywhere else in our environment. Cool. We're going to go threat hunting a little bit more. However, it's still part of this incident. It's still under this umbrella. It's still under this umbrella for multiple different reasons. For man hours, for cycles that we're utilizing, for budgetary reasons, for insurance reasons, all these other things. It's still part of this incident. We're going to create new rules, new content in all of our monitoring and detection platforms. If I see this talking on 445, then alert me because, oh shit, we've seen this before. We're going to create this content. It's important that we continually create content. Any avenues of approach that we saw open, we're going to close. For example, this true story, worked with an organization, and when WannaCry hit, I said, do we have egress filtering? And they said, yes, of course we do. We block port 25 because we don't want to be a spam relay. It's like, seriously, that's all we're doing. Well, yeah, we don't want to be a spam relay. That's bad. Like, yeah, no shit, that's bad. You know what else is bad? Letting data bleed out the company. Avenues of approach that we know we can fix. Let's fix those holes. Now, I'm going to kind of close this off with preparation. In a traditional incident response model, this is the very first thing you see. When I started this presentation, I said, if we're doing some kind of threat hunting, the assumption is we have something. We have some kind of incident response. We have some kind of prep work already done. Whether it's formal or not. Maybe it's just that Kevin knows that if X happens, do Y. Maybe it's not documented, but he knows it. When we're talking incident response, threat hunting, threat modeling, any of those things, it all goes through a process. And then once we've actually been through it, we're in like, oh shit, we should make sure this doesn't happen again. So let's update some stuff. Update your incident response plan with anything new that you've learned. Maybe you thought that the right person in corporate communications was Bill, but it's actually Jill. No, that needs to be changed. Maybe so-and-so's cell phone number has changed. Sounds silly, but that should be updated. All these little things that we found during our incident, during our threat intelligence, during our threat hunting, we need to update. Communicate any necessary information to the user base. If the primary attack vector was determined to be phishing, we need to go through and we need to talk to our user base about don't click on shit. I know it's a whole different talk. A lot of people have tried to figure that out. There's a reason it's the number one attack vector. Maybe it's something about installing software. Maybe because somebody installed a malicious piece of software because they had admin on their box, and the corporate policy is, yeah, anyone can be an admin on their box. How are they going to install iTunes if they don't? Maybe we need to change that. Maybe we need to update our policies and procedures to say, you are not allowed to install iTunes on your box, especially when you go to iTunes.ch. That's not iTunes. Don't go there. I hope that you all got something out of this talk. The most important things I'm going to leave you with are this. Incident response team, incident response tabletops, more than just y'all. You need to get business people involved. Threat intelligence is not a scary thing. The dark web is not a scary thing if you use it right. There's plenty of publicly accessible areas of the dark web that you can utilize to gather information and threat intelligence. Threat hunting is something you've probably been doing before, but you didn't realize you were. Go through and look for shit in your environment. If you have downtime, grab some indicators. Go back through your logs and say, I saw this one day. I got like an hour to kill. I'm going to go through my network and see if I can find more about it. Do that stuff. At this point, I'm out of bullets. Any questions? Yes, sir. So the question was, in response to getting business units involved in the tabletop exercise, how do you weigh, in essence, the importance of their time and things like that involved with the tabletop? So there's a couple of things that you can utilize in that capacity. If it is a publicly traded organization, it's very simple. Board members are financially responsible for a breach. That's easy to utilize and say, hey, by the way, if you don't send representatives, bad things can happen for you. Number one, publicly traded. Number two, let them dial in. They don't have to be physically present in the room. Number three, they don't have to be involved for the entire thing. You can let them know, for example, legal. You don't have to be physically in the room to participate in this tabletop exercise. Here's what we're going to be talking about. Give them an idea ahead of time about what it's about. Let them know what their role would be in that in this exercise. And say at some point between the hours of 9 and 12, you might receive a phone call for this tabletop exercise asking you for what we should do next, or a text message, or a whatever. The most important thing, if they can't be there and they can't participate in the whole thing, give them the option to be there for just at least the part that they need to be involved in. It's going to help the exercise, but even if they're only involved for 5 minutes, that's 5 more minutes that they've thought about incident response than God knows how long. Answer your question? Anyone else? What's up? So the question from the Ukrainian guy was, I've known him for a long time, it's okay. The question was, before you get C-suite or senior executives involved in a tabletop exercise, should you acclimate them to certain terms, certain things, to better prepare them for an exercise or something like that? The answer is yes. So what I typically do, whether I'm internal or whether I'm acting as a consultant, is here's who the participants of the incident response tabletop should be. Let me see your incident response plan, because I'm going to need that to critique how we do. Send that out to the incident response team. Make sure that they understand it. They've probably seen it before, hopefully, but they probably haven't looked at it since the last time you sent it. Ask them to take a look at it and ask if they have any questions. So at minimum in that email, you're giving them the plan. You're affording them the opportunity to make comments or whatever. But that's whether they take that to heart is, a different story, but that's how I do it. I make sure that they at least receive the plan again for review. Does that answer your question? All right. Anyone else? Yes, sir. Could you say the last part? So the question was, and raise your hand if I'm wrong. Instead of doing, repeat your question. I'm sorry. I'm old, man. I'm 45. So instead of just engaging your C-level execs for a couple hours, why not do forensics in parallel? You would. So what anything that you've seen up here, the little bullets that go like this and shit, that doesn't mean that's all happening in its own vacuum. A lot of these things you're going to do in tandem. For example, I might run down analysis and determine it's 445 and it's wormable, so I'm going to jump immediately into containment, while somebody else might be briefing the executives on why I'm doing things. I might be pulling a system offline, doing forensics on it, while we're still doing analysis, because I know this was patient 0. So in some cases, you're going to be doing that anyway. Does that answer your question? Anyone else? I got none. Screw your questions. No, I'm just kidding. All right. Honestly, thank you very much for coming. Thank you, Rocky, and the whole BSides crew. Awesome job.
All right, buddy. Kevin, do you want the live mic here? Okay.